I'm very excited about today. Some of our more popular webcasts and webinars have been where we have been able to get some landowners and some real estate professionals on the calls and explain kind of their vision of how they look at land. Some of these folks have utilized LandGate to receive offers to lease their property or sell their properties, things like that. And we're going to go over today pretty in depth what I would consider one of the more successful combos when it comes to land professionals such as Scott and landowners with Belinda, who's she just jumped off, but she's going to be right back on here. But Belinda, who really has done some amazing things with a piece of ground that, because of the way she was looking at the property and the tools and the resources she had available to her, has really done some amazing things with the revenue on those properties. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce Scott and Belinda, and they're going to tell you a little bit about themselves, and then I'm going to tell you a little bit about LandGate, what we do, and then we're going to get right into it, and we're going to have a conversation here and see what kind of advice Scott and Belinda have for all of you out there. I know there's a lot of landowners on the call. There's a lot of real estate professionals on the call, and they want to hear, you all want to hear what Scott and Belinda have to say. So Scott, I'll go ahead and start out with you. You've been, in my opinion, a person who's really been attempting to be at the tip of the spear when it comes to being a real estate professional. Not necessarily like we talked about yesterday, not a real estate agent, a land professional, real estate professional, Tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, how'd you get into the business, and what kind of properties do you deal with mainly?
Okay, well, like I said, my name is Scot Oliver, and I'm with the ranch company, Mason and Morse Ranch Company. I ranch myself in eastern Colorado and western Kansas. I've done so most of my life, third generation, really fourth generation farmer rancher. So I understand the farm and ranch community and the people and how they think. And so anyway, I've been a realtor for about between 6 and 7 years, but before that I've owned livestock auctions and other ag-related, businesses, feeder cattle and purebred cattle breeder and just all kind of things. So anyway, like I said, I relate to everyone in this business. So I went to a meeting that we had with RLI with you a couple years ago in Denver, and it just kind of clicked with me. I'm always looking for ways to maximize my investment on my own lands and others as well. So it was just kind of a no-brainer when I saw this. I said, man, this is a great thing, because we really didn't have anywhere to go. I had done some things with oil and gas, and I have some go-to people that I use in my team, so to speak. Everyone has a team, of attorneys and accountants and other people. And anyway, so I had a guy that I relied upon, and I saw that, with LandGate, I was actually on another platform for a little while. And when I got with you guys, it was just a breath of fresh air, because everyone is so open and willing to help. And the information is right there for you. So anyway, like I like to tell people, I said, they may not want to sell their land. They may not want to, to do a wind lease or a solar lease or carbon credits, but don't you think that, wouldn't you like to be able to make an educated decision by getting all the information that you can, regardless if you use it or not? So anyway, that's pretty much my story. But I like I said, I deal mostly with larger ranch land and farmland properties, Kansas, Nebraska, Colorado. So
Absolutely. But very good, Scott. Yeah, I remember you being in that course. And, when you and Belinda were talking yesterday, you were thinking about, how many people actually utilize all of the resources and things that you learned about in that course. And I'll say I don't really know, but I know that you definitely have. And this is kind of a unique property that we're going to be talking about today. Let's go ahead and jump into it here. Again, we're going to be talking about maximizing revenues on your property. We're going to talk heavily about wind today, but this covers this piece of property because of yourself and Belinda. You guys have really expanded the revenue potential to solar, carbon credits, things like that. And let's go ahead and take a look at that. But as we go through this, we really encourage a lot of engagement with the folks that are watching here. So at any time, if you have questions, please feel free to email those at Michaela Bishop at mb@landgate.com. We'll go ahead and get those in. We'll answer those live. Also, feel free to put your question in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. Hover your mouse down there. You should see a Q&A button. Feel free to put your questions in there as well. But we do encourage questions. So
we do have a quick question, Craig.
Okay, go ahead.
Actually,
Jordan,
relating to the course that you and Scott briefly just talked about, Tori was actually curious, what was the course, and is it still being offered, or any more information you can maybe provide about that course?
Absolutely. It's a course, and Scott, I'll let you give a criticism about it when I'm done here, but it's a course that LandGate teaches. I'm the actual instructor on that course, and we teach that through the Real Estate Land Institute. And the next in-person class we're going to be doing is the end of April. If you're interested in taking that class, it's going to be in Idaho. But I've taught those classes all over the place. The one that Scott came to, we were in Denver. I've done them North Carolina, Georgia. I've done the Idaho, you name it. We've been there, been Minnesota, all over the place. So we do hold those classes for individual real estate brokerages. We've done them for landowner groups. We do that for really anybody. But the next one is going to be in Idaho, the end of April. If you want some more information on that, please submit your email. We'll get you the information on that. And Scott, do you want to touch on quickly a little bit about that?
Sent you, or Jordan just sent you another email. Let's see if that one works instead. Sorry about all.
That was Michaela. Yeah. Sorry about that. If not a problem, not a problem. If you're interested in taking one of those courses, please submit your email to, again, if you want to send your contact information to Michaela, feel free to send that in. We'll get you that information sent right over. But let's go in the sake of saving some time here. I really want to get into this property and what was taking place on that property, Scott. So for everybody looking here, this is a very large piece of property down in Southeast Colorado that Scott has been representing and doing a phenomenal job looking at all the options on it. I mean, Scott, how many total acres are we looking at here roughly on this ranch?
There's about 20,000 acres total, 16,000 roughly of deeded acres, maybe a little more. I've been dealing with another property, so my numbers may be off. But anyway, yeah, we listed this on LandGate, and I can't tell you how many phone calls that we got within 30 minutes. We started getting phone calls, okay, about the wind towers. So anyway, we ended up doing 13,000 acres. It already had a few wind towers on there, but we got a lease for another 13,000 acres. And currently we're working on about 4,000 acres of solar. And there's also been transmission lines that have gone through here, or that are going through the 3-state connector. Just a lot of things are happening on this property. I mean, we named it the Energy Ranch, and it sure turned out to be that way. It even has oil and gas on it, water. I mean, it has everything. So it was my first property to really to list and to learn on, and Belinda is a wealth of knowledge as well. So you know, just learning from you guys, from LandGate, Brooke and yourself have been so helpful. Like I said, I've learned a lot now. I know a lot more than I did, but I didn't know a whole lot to begin with, but I know where to go
Yeah.
and who to ask, and I know the professionals to deal with. So I think that's the main thing is knowing who to answer your questions and who to partner with and team with. And LandGate's been great.
Well, I really appreciate that, Scott. Thanks for the kind words. And just for the
It's
folks
true.
that are out, just for the folks that are out there listening, when Scott says we created a listing, what is unique about what LandGate does and how Scott started leveraging the system is Belinda, the landowner, didn't want to sell this piece of property. She saw that there's potential here. And for those of you who have been down in Southeast Colorado, on a very calm, no wind blowing summer evening, it's a very beautiful place, but it's pretty rough. It can be very rough country during other times of the year. And the ground itself doesn't generate that much revenue. If you're relying just on grazing for these large pastures, Scott, it's not an enormous revenue generating machine, which is unique. And that's why we wanted you guys on the webinar here is Belinda, the landowner, looked at this piece of property differently. What you're seeing now is how the property sits. And this is data coming from LandGate. You can all get this on LandGate, and I'll show it here at the end of the webinar, the information and natural resources that you get access to on all the properties using LandGate. But what you're seeing here are these red lines and these big yellow circles here. Those are those transmission lines and substations, right? So here's these substation down here in the bottom right. You're seeing the transmission lines, these big, heavy capacity transmission lines carrying electrons to and from. And there's the wind tower. So you're seeing that data real time. But this ranch didn't always look this way. You're seeing each one of these little triangles as a wind turbine, very, very large blades of fan that generate income for the property. Scott, what was the train of thought there for Belinda in her first round of leasing the property? Because that's what you're talking about. You created a property, a listing for this property to generate revenue, whether it be solar, wind, carbon, whatever it is. You are a real estate professional, and your goal working with Belinda wasn't to sell this piece of property, which is, I think, very unique. And that's what I think I'd like you to touch on a little bit for the other real estate professionals here. You had a different frame of mind working with Belinda here, rather than I need to sell this piece of property because I need my commission tomorrow or next month, right? You've been working with Belinda for years on this ranch, right?
Yeah, and we did try to offer it for sale, but then we've gotten so much income from the property. It doesn't really matter. I've done this with other properties as well, other owners. I look at things a little bit different than a lot of folks as far as I view there's plenty out there, okay? And if I just help someone, help someone, a family or whatever, a lot of this money is generational wealth, okay? It's a big deal. It's going on regardless if I want to do it or not. I mean, I have some questions if I agree with some of it or not. That's not the point. It's going on anyway. So if I can help, a family keep farming and ranching, that's great. As far as selling it, there's a lot of, this doesn't work for every place. There's a lot of places this doesn't work, but you don't know unless you list it and put it out there and let people take a look at it. But like I said, I don't worry about selling the property. They'll come back. They'll remember you, and at some point, it may be a year down the road, it may be 2-3 years down the road, but they're going to remember that you helped them and their family in their farming situation. So they'll always remember that. So when there does come a time you need to sell, then you're good to go.
I think that's important, Scott, not just for the land and real estate professionals on the call, but for the landowners listening as well. I think it's crucially important that whoever it is you're working with is someone that has a mentality like Scott, if someone comes to me with my property, Scott, and says, "Hi, Craig, I'm a real estate agent, and boy, I can sell your property faster and for more money than anybody else," I'm not interested, because me as a landowner, I don't want to sell my property. But when a land professional comes to me and says, "Hey, Craig, I'm a land professional and I know a heck of a lot about land. That's what I do. I know about property. I know about how to make properties just like you and Belinda did here," right? You turned this pasture land into an energy ranch. It has multiple different streams of cash flow at this point, right? The first generation of wind leasing that you guys all did on the ranch, that was your first, you've fundamentally changed the property at that point. You've established cash flow on the property. What you guys did next is you went ahead and leased more ground out for wind turbines. Now, not everybody has 20,000 acres to work with, but every property is a little bit unique, right? Some properties might be real, maybe only 30, 40 acres. It could be very good for a battery storage location or EV charging, all of this expansion of different types of resources. It could be sitting there in the waiting, but unless you are aware of those resources and you have a leverage for those resources, and when I say leverage, I'll talk just here very briefly about LandGate, and this is what LandGate offers. So here, this is available, everything you see here, and I'll do a quick plug of LandGate here. Everything you see here is $10 a month. It's on an online, mobile-friendly website. $10 a month, you get ownership and information, property line information across the United States. But what Scott was saying, and this is how he looks at properties a little bit differently, I can easily go through and click on any piece of property, and very quickly, it's going to show me all of the different potential values on this piece of property. Very quickly, from 0 to 100, where do I have hidden value? And also, where may I have some risks? So where may I have some risks on the property? And this is important for landowners, because I don't know a single landowner or property owner out there who's not actively trying to increase their assets of purchasing more property. With our app, with LandGate, I can go through and run extraordinarily quick due diligence of every single piece of property very quickly and find out about everything I need to know on the piece of property. But then I also, through LandGate, get access to listings such as Scott's, any listing that goes up on the website, and then also any types of pieces of property that are being leased for their minerals, mining rights, carbon credits. If I'm looking for people who are leasing out their property for agriculture or recreation purposes or water rights, I get access to an exclusive marketplace as well. So this really opens up the ability for landowners to do their due diligence and for real estate professionals to elevate their level of sophistication when looking at properties very, very quickly. And that's, Scott, when you say, because of LandGate, I've been able to do this, that's exactly what you did, using LandGate. You built out this enormous piece of property. There's the listing itself, and quickly ran analytics on that to be able to show for yourself, become very knowledgeable about that piece of property, but then also show the landowner, hey, Belinda, have you ever thought of this opportunity? And it's really funny that we're having this webinar today, because I just received an email. Scott, you do a phenomenal amount of large properties in Colorado, Kansas, things like that. I got an email this morning from a landowner who self-listed his property to receive offers for solar leasing on his land. He had already received a couple of offers, and this gentleman sent me an email today, and he's thanking me. And his actual quote was, "Thank you so much for creating this website, because you just made my grandchildren about $10 million more." And that was his exact email. We're going to get him on a video giving us that quote. But that's the power of now this open marketplace. Just like you said, Scott, you guys created this listing to generate revenue on the property, not to sell the property. Hey, Did you know, landowners, that you can sell the cash flow from your solar panels or wind turbines? And that's what you and Belinda did here. The listing went up, and 30 minutes later, I remember you calling me. You said, "Man, you got to have these guys quit calling. They're taking up all my time." But your phone started melting down. And that's
Yeah, they
what's
did.
happening. That's the unique part of this marketplace. So do you want to touch on that a little bit, Scott? Like, how, for the landowners out there listening, and there's going to be folks from the East Coast, West Coast, up in Minnesota, Montana, down to Texas. Every piece of property is a little bit unique. What advice would you give to those landowners, Scott? Maybe they're thinking about selling, maybe they all want to make more revenue, but what is the best advice that you could give them, Scott, about how to do what you and Belinda have done on this unique piece of property?
The best advice is just to do it. Another example, I'll go about that in a roundabout way. Another example, I have another larger property in southeast Colorado. We listed the property for sale. I told the landowner, "Now, would you like me to see if I can increase the value of your ranch?" Well, who's going to say no? Okay, so we did that. I listed the property on LandGate, both for sale, for the wind, the solar. I ended up getting got a lot of calls on it. Got a solar company that is going to purchase the property, okay, for $1 million more than we had it listed for, okay, with less acreage. Okay, so the guy's going to keep, a few thousand acres that we had listed for sale, plus he's making more money. So they're extremely happy and they want to sell. So not everyone wants the lease, wants to go the lease route. Some people just want out and use their money for something else and, do a 1031, which they can do with both the income streams and the sale of the property. So I think you need to talk about that a little bit. Craig,
Yes.
sorry, I'm not trying to
No,
tell
no,
you
no.
what to talk about.
I think you're right. And I think you're exactly right, is understanding. I think that's critical, to understanding what you can do on a piece of property and what you can't do. Right. So we've kind of talked about here a little bit that, you and Belinda took this big piece of property, and we've had some questions about acreage maximums and minimums. How much acreage do you need to be able to utilize some of these resources? And I'm going to touch on that.
40 acres.
Or
Yeah,
even
it can be as
smaller than
little
that.
as,
Even
yeah,
smaller
even
than that.
smaller than that. Yeah, I know. I just had a property by Pueblo, Colorado, and it was a friend of mine when I used to farm in Virginia. And I had called him, hadn't talked to him for 20 years, and he said, "Man, what's going on out there? I have someone that asked me to help them, or asked me to put solar on our property. We leased it." And I said, "Well, I can help you." I said, "If you ever need any help." Well, that company went away, and we put it on LandGate. And also I work with another solar company now that I met through LandGate. Okay, so I have multiple ways to go with people. So anyway, that helped them out. Now we've got a lease and they're going to put battery storage on there. So
awesome. Well, let me touch
anyway,
on that a little bit, of acreage minimums. Okay, there's what we're talking about. This is Scott's and Belinda's property here, very large piece of property, 20,000 acres. Not everybody has 20,000 acres, but there's a lot of folks that have an acre here, 20 acres there, 10 acres. They have smaller properties, myself included, right? When we talk about solar energy, and this is not an advocation or a degradation of either side of whether or not I love renewable energy or hate it. It's irrelevant what I think about it. All energy is good energy, and that's our stance at LandGate. All energy resources are really good energy resources, and the more energy we have in this country, the better off everyone does, especially the people that don't have a lot. The cheaper their energy is, the better. So that's all I'll say about that. But when it comes to solar, it's going to come, whether it's in your county or in your backyard yet, it's coming in a very big way. We're talking about the solar interest that Scott has been receiving. This is for utility scale solar, hundreds, if not thousands of acres of solar panels. That is not, you're not dependent on that, just be if you have enormous amounts of acreage. This is again within the LandGate system. You get access to all of this information through a $10 a month subscription. But this is a piece of property. I think this is right outside of Philadelphia. So you're seeing all of the rooftop locations. You're seeing all the parking lot locations. The rooftops and parking lots in the United States are incredibly underutilized. This parcel here is only 4.3 acres, but it has an enormous amount of value when it comes to rooftop solar. So this is part of the analytics LandGate does. It tells you exactly how many megawatts of solar energy can be generated from this site, how many total amounts of power it's going to generate throughout the year, how many tons of carbon dioxide it's going to offset, and the overall revenue that's going to be associated with that. So when people are talking about, well, is my parcel large enough? I've seen smaller scale, what we call community and behind the meter solar farms go up on parcels as small as a few acres. What's interesting that you're going to want to utilize LandGate for is understanding what the buildable acres are on certain pieces of property. So when you go to LandGate and you click on a piece of property, it'll show you the different exclusion zones as far as, let's see, what kind of soils you have on the property, what kind of flood zones you have on the property, where you have, and you're seeing here, topography issues in the red there, but it's going to give a very in-depth summary of your own property. We do that for free. You can go to the website and get that analysis, but you need to understand what your property has as far as all of these different types of resources, carbon credits, water, oil and gas, all of these different things. Then you can make a decision on how best to utilize that property to generate some revenue. And once you've done that, it's very, very easy to just essentially click on your property and create your own listing. You are in charge of your own listing. I probably should have said this earlier, Scott. We charge no commission. Any of the deals when you've posted your deals up on LandGate, there is no commission that comes out. There is no listing fee. It is a completely free service. You are connected directly with the lead for your listing. That's a huge component, and that's a 180-degree difference between online real estate marketplaces with what LandGate does. Your leads, if you're a real estate agent or a professional out there, your leads are your leads. If a listing of yours is up on LandGate, you are the contact information. You are the person who's going to be reached out to. But that's how landowners themselves, Scott, right? Let's say they're fairly savvy. They've been listening to webinars, watching YouTube videos, and they have a fairly good idea of how to go about this, at least to start by themselves. It's simple enough for them to just post a listing out here. It's going to go out in front of every energy company, carbon company, oil and gas company on the planet, and they're going to see it, and they're going to get inbounds for that. So do you have anything you'd like to add there from the real estate professional, how this has been able to help you get eyeballs on your listings to generate revenue from those properties?
Well, I do charge a commission, a fee to help people. A lot of people, they can list on LandGate, but they need some guidance. They need some help. We have attorneys that we use, Belinda and I, that have done this a lot. So it's not like grabbing an attorney that's never done any, that's, what I'm trying to say, that's experienced in the energy field. So I think that's important. And there's a lot of different facets of and details about doing this. So I think Belinda's on here. I think she could probably explain some of that. Now we finally got her on.
Belinda, it's great to have you on. I know we've had a little bit of technical difficulties there, but I really want you to give your perspective from a landowner, how you were viewing the property. But right before you do that, go ahead and give us a quick overview. Where are you from? How'd you get into the property? Things like that. Give us a quick summary and then jump right into it. Let the folks listening know about how you view property and what they need to know looking at their property, whether it's 20,000 acres or 20 acres.
Okay, can you hear me okay now?
Yep, we got you.
Okay, great. So sorry for the technical difficulties. I don't know what went on, but we're on now. So I have always been interested in real estate, and in the past had a real estate license for over 20 years plus. And in that real estate license, you learn a lot about property and how to value property. And you learn that is, most people, that's their single largest investment. So I always thought it was really important to know as much as you could about it. So my husband acquired this ranch back in 01, and it was his desire his whole life to own a ranch. So he managed to work really hard and obtain this ranch, and he bought it to run yearlings on originally and to semi-retire. Well, anyone who's been on a ranch knows you're not really retired, you're ranching. So anyway, I moved out to the ranch in 09, and at that time he'd already had a wind lease in place with 15 wind turbines. And so we had looked at the ranch and just reviewed it. And my initial thought was, wow, this is an energy ranch. It's got everything you can imagine on it. The wind is good, the solar's good. It's got good natural resources with water as well as minerals. So as we went through the process of developing the ranch and looking at different ways to be profitable on the ranch and to maintain it, one of the ways we did, we leased out 12,000 acres to a neighboring rancher and reduced our workload because we're older. And then we started just, I had the good fortune of meeting Scott, who is such an exception to the rule. He's a wonderful guy, and he understands it's your biggest single investment that you make, and he wants you to maximize it. And he truly cares what's best for the landowner, which is really, really refreshing. And so we have worked together researching and finding out how to try to maximize the value of the ranch and look at solar potential, carbon credit potential. One thing that I got very involved in was working with some people with some conservation easements on the rest of the property. And that second wind lease was, instrumental in helping us. And as everyone knows, ranching is expensive, and to stay in business, it's very difficult unless you have the resources to be able to do that. It takes more than just raising a cow these days.
Absolutely, absolutely, Belinda. And I think, when we were talking yesterday, you were talking about the conservation easements and how, that's somewhat of a default go-to for a lot of these landowners when they don't want to sell their ranch, right? They want the ranch to be there for the kids and the grandkids and the great grandkids, but they do need some money, right? It's not working, right? The balance sheet is not working out running $5 an acre cattle on the property, right? And the first thing they do, their go-to is, well, let's put in a conservation easement. And I think you touched on a really critical thing there is, what are you actually giving up with that conservation easement? And obviously all of them are different, and that's not, I'm definitely no expert in that, but that's why I think it's important, Belinda, to look at your property, not just a ranch, but any piece of property, the way you looked at your energy ranch and saying, hold on a minute, before we go ahead and take all of this stuff off of the table, let's try to identify what resources are there. Is wind a potential? Is solar a potential? What about battery storage? What about solar? Because if you would have just straight away gone to 20,000 acres, we're going to get X amount per acre, putting it into a conservation easement, probably would have been a really nice payday for you at the time. But since you looked at other options there, that would have been catastrophic for you, at least as limiting what your revenue potential would have been on this property. Do you want to touch on that a little bit of how critical that is to really knowing all of your different values there?
Sure. I think it is so important. So when I was working with some of these other people that had already placed conservation easements on their property, they didn't even realize they had given up these rights. And when you read the contract, it all sounds great, right? The conservation easements sound wonderful, sound good. But when you look at the detail and you look at the language in there, it very casually mentions that all development, all energy development, all carbon credits, everything all goes to the land trust. So for this really small dollar amount, they're receiving all of your assets. So and when I explained that to people, I said, it says right here, you signed it over when you signed the easement. And then on top of that, that easement can be transferred by the land trust without the owner's permission to somebody else. So you don't even know who might be holding your land rights. So I think that what happens is that was the easiest way for them to quickly get money. And the other requires work. It requires you putting in the time and effort. And I encourage everybody to educate themselves on what's capable of being done on their property, and really take the time it takes to do that. We actually severed our minerals and held them in a separate estate and separated some of the properties into two different entities so we could operate those entities to their maximum potential. So I think, it's really important to look at all those factors. And it's, when you look at the conservation easement, some of the contracts I read said, oh, we get 100% of the minerals and carbon credits included, all of that. And some of them said we get 50%, but most of the contracts, the landowner gave up at least 50% or more. And I looked at probably 30 of those contracts. So I would encourage the landowners to, take your time, use the resources you have at LandGate, use a land real estate professional to help you, and use an attorney that truly cares too about knowing that this is your largest asset, and be extra careful. And because you want to leave a legacy to your family, you don't want to just dispose of this. You want to have it where it continues on and on if you can. The other aspect a lot of people don't realize is you can sell off your wind royalties or your solar royalties. And so, some people go, well, I'm never going to live to see that. Why would I want to do it? Well, you can still sell it off and get those royalties, and you can treat them as a 1031, as an exchange. There's multiple things you can do. So I know it's a lot of information, but by educating themselves, they can really maximize the value of their land.
I think that's important. And let me unpack what you said there a little bit so we can look at the full process, right? You said back in 01, you guys purchased that big ranch, big piece of property, you were grazing it, and fast forward to where you're at today, selling wind payments, right? And think of the
Right.
process that you went through. You changed this property from the main cash flow on it. And this is not just 20,000 acre ranches. This could be this 6-acre property right in front of us that I'm looking at on my screen. It doesn't matter the size of the property. I think your point, Belinda, was understanding everything that you need to know about this piece of property. You took a piece of property, you identified a resource, you put it into a market where now you have competitive offers coming in, you establish new baselines of cash flow. In this case, you did it twice. Multiple rounds of wind leasing. Now you're going to be probably doing some solar leasing, some carbon credit leasing. And you touched on one thing that, again, we briefly skimmed over it here in the webinar, but selling the lease payments themselves. You've established this baseline revenue on the piece of property. So Belinda, you're saying right now, of the 15, 20 turbines that, because of your thought process and actions, is now on the property generating income, you're saying that the landowner can now sell the cash flow, not selling any of the dirt, not selling the land. They're essentially selling that lease, that extra added value, and that is a 1031 exchange.
Yes, sir.
That
And
is an
that's
incredible thing. Unpack
right.
that for us a little bit, Belinda.
So when those revenues come in, they can be treated as an exchange. So you could take those revenues and say you want to buy another piece of property or grow and develop. You can take that revenue stream and then take a 1031 on it, and you still own the land. You still have the property itself, and you're only selling the terms of that lease. So when that lease is up, if the wind company renews again, you still have that as yours. You don't sell it in perpetuity. You sell the current lease that's in place. And that way you can use that as a 1031 to grow and develop and put it in something that can generate additional income. It's a wonderful
Go buy another
opportunity.
ranch.
Yeah, go buy another one.
Buy another energy ranch, right?
Correct.
That's important. And that's what's really important. And that's, I love doing these webinars because there's landowners on the call wanting to make good investments for themselves, either land banking, $50,000 here, $500,000 or whatever it is. They want to know what an investment bank knows or what Wells Fargo knows on the due diligence of the property. And the land professionals want to be able to provide those services for their buyers. So Belinda, let's take it one step further, right? You had your ranch property, you've leased it a couple times, you've established cash flow, you've sold that cash flow off, even though you're still holding all 20,000 acres. Now you've got, let's call it rough numbers here. Let's say you got $10 million in a 1031 exchange, and you're going to go to Scott and you're going to say, Scott, I don't want to just go buy a beach house in Corpus Christi and some row crop. I want you to find me row crop, but something that has very high value for solar, wind, EV charging. I want you, Scott, to go find me another undervalued energy ranch, because it's a piece of property where the sellers or the holders of that asset may only be looking at that piece of property through the one lens that they've been looking at it, right? And Scott's going to go and say, great, let's do it. And you're going to leverage this tool, you're going to leverage your knowledge, all of the tools that you have afforded to you. You're going to find that and you're going to say, here's 15 different properties, here's the upside, and you can have them laid out. You can print these really cool reports out, right, Scott? And you can just look at these things side by side. Where do we have high values on this piece of property? What are we buying the land for? Where is there unknown risks? And you can go through and you can start screening all of these different properties and really get an understanding of what it is you're looking at, so you can make intelligent investments as well. So it's on both sides. It's on whether you're thinking about selling a piece of property, you want to make revenue on property, or you're buying property. The one who has the most information is the one who makes the best decisions in any transaction. Right, Scott? And that's what you do. That's your living. I mean, how big of importance is that for you when you're going out there trying to find a piece of property for someone to buy? How has your view of looking at property changed over the last couple of years? And even Belinda, your view as the landowner, how has it changed over the last 3 or 4 years of looking at property and saying, we need to make sure we know everything because there's so many new opportunities out there?
Yeah, I was just looking at some property yesterday on LandGate, and like I said, it was farm ground, but I'm like, okay, what else can this property do? So no, it's I don't know why you wouldn't, you know?
Yep. And Belinda, I mean, and this is a very complimentary way to say this, is you're not your typical most landowners don't have 20,000 acres, but even the ones that do have 20,000 acres, most of them that I've talked to didn't have the foresight to turn it into an energy ranch, which you have done. We talked a little bit yesterday about carbon credits. And is that something, we get a lot of inbound questions from landowners about carbon credits and what they can do. So you heavily developed and you're making a lot of money and good for you on the wind energy on your ranch. There's going to be some solar potentials because of the substations, transmission lines. There's solar potential there as well. The next frontier from the conversations we've had sounds to be like potential with carbon credits. How are you viewing those, and what put that on your radar, Belinda?
So our neighboring ranch is, they have received carbon credits for a long time. They get it from the climate people. And what put it on my radar is I actually said, how did they get funded? How did this land trust get funded? So I went and did an open records request and found out how they got funded. Then I went and met with them. I said, how did you do that? And they said, well, we got carbon credits. So I asked them to please explain that to me. So they did, and they were very nice and helpful about, the carbon credits pay either a 10-year, 15 or 20-year contract, and it's all about the climate control. I was hesitant because I didn't like some of the things you see. It's almost like a conservation easement in some way. So I looked at the language of it, so I steered away. But right now there's a lot going on in the open market. I don't know how familiar you are, but there were some things done with natural asset. They try to put it on the New York Stock Exchange, which would basically fund the land trust sum, and that got shot down. I am seeing that coming across in comprehensive land use right now throughout the US. So I'm still playing the waiting game a little and watching the market. There was the Chicago Climate Exchange for a while, and those dollars are decent, but I think they're going to go up, and I think the restrictions are going to come down. So I'm kind of playing the waiting game a little bit with that. It depends on what type of grass you have, what kind of carbon emissions you have. All of that is relative to what you can do with it. So,
Sorry, Belinda, go ahead.
but I mean, it's nice to have that income stream, but they have like a 3-year check where they come in and say, if you didn't do it quite right, we could take the money back. And so I don't really like that portion of it. And I don't see that in all of them, but in some of them, I see that. But I think it's going to get more competitive, and I think there's going to be some opportunities there. People just make sure you read the details of the contract. And when you feel like you've read it through and through, make sure a good qualified attorney who's familiar in that researches it as well with you.
Yeah, one thing I'd say there, Belinda, is, treat those carbon credits the same way you did with the wind and the solar, right? It's a competitive marketplace. Every company's a little bit different, how their contracts are structured, how their compensation to landowners is structured differently. And that's, what you do utilizing LandGate's platform is the listing goes up there, and anybody who's interested in finding that property is going to reach out to that landowner. So that's a really good way to see what's out there in the market. And we've got a few minutes here. I do want to get through a couple questions that I think were very very useful. The first one is going to be, and it's a very typical question: removing the equipment from the property, whether that's these turbines or the solar farms. Belinda, you're the landowner. You own this property. What would you like to say about reclamation and things like that? What would you like to add to it? What are your concerns that you have as a landowner with these on your property?
So I was so concerned about it because the first contract I felt like didn't provide a good enough clause in there for what's called decommissioning. And there is some cost in doing that. So we had a professional come out and actually do a complete analysis for us of what it would cost to actually decommission those turbines and to scrap salvage them and the whole 9 yards. And so they did that for us. And what I said is we need to go to the counties, and the counties need to put some checks and balances in, and they need to have some bonding requirements for the wind companies so that the landowner is protected. And early on, there was none of that. There was no protection for the landowner. Now they're doing bonding, and they're doing it over a period of, several years. So they're letting them start and bond so much each year so that the wind company is responsible for taking the turbines down. However, if they file bankruptcy, you're done. If they're bonded, the bond will cover that removal because it is very expensive, and there is some environmentally sensitive material in there that causes the cost to go up. So I think having that decommissioning clause in there, some contracts say, they have so long to decommission them. And if they don't, then it belongs to the landowner. Well, that's not a great deal because then you got to deal with it. So I think that decommissioning clause is really important for landowners to look at and to see what their county commissioners have in their planning and zoning regarding that.
Very good answer. Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. There's been some very big advances in the bond requirements for a lot of these developers, and that goes from solar, battery storage, wind developers. Reclamation clauses are almost standard in almost anything that we've seen lately, going through our marketplace. So critical to have that in there, but as anything, as things go on in time, the lease agreements get a little bit tighter, and those are pretty standard now for reclamation. Again, there's no cost from the landowner to that. There's no cost, and that's another thing. There's no cost for construction. You are renting out your property, essentially. They're utilizing that property, and you're the beneficiary. You're going to get paid essentially a royalty or rent payment on that. There is no cost associated to you. one more question here is because solar is going to be very popular, especially with some of the smaller properties. And that's what LandGate does. That's pretty unique. Actually, it's very unique. There's no other company in the United States or even the world that does this. When I clicked on this little piece of property here, you can do this online. You can do this on you can claim, or you can get this information on one property a day for free at no cost. Or you can pay $10 a month and you get access to all of the ownership information. You get this for 100 and I think it's 150 plus million parcels in the United States. But when I clicked on that parcel, this solar energy calculation actually ran an analysis. How close was I or am I to the nearest substation? How close am I to the nearest transmission line? How close am I to the nearest solar farm? And then there's about 50 other factors that fall into, well, what is going to affect the lease rate at this exact location? And we actually break that down. For this specific location, you can anticipate about $1,100 per acre per year for every acre that you would get solar panels put on the property. That takes into account every engineering calculation as far as pricing, how many exclusion zones are on the property. If we would have clicked on a property down here, it would have excluded all of this flood zone and this wetland. And you can see the railroads here. You can see a pipeline easement going through the property. All of that is generated very quickly for not just the solar information, but every other piece of information on that property very, very quickly. And that's what Scott was talking about early on. This is information that every landowner needs to know, whether buying, selling, holding. Belinda, because of her deep knowledge of land and experience, she got to the point of knowing all of this about her property. But she did all of that, and it probably took quite a bit of time prior to LandGate existing, whereas now she can find all of this stuff out very, very quickly. So if she was to sell those cash flows, the lease payments from her wind turbines, and she wanted to go out there, and her and Scott are going to go find more properties to purchase, especially for the land professionals listening, this is a go-to, absolutely critical tool to evaluating due diligence on properties very, very quickly. So there we are. We're at the top of the hour. What else? And I try to end every webinar this way, and I'll toss it to you, Scott, and then over to Belinda. For the folks on the call listening, for land professionals and landowners, Scott, what is it that you need them to know after listening to this conversation? What's the one that they remember? One thing, what is it that they need to remember?
LandGate is another tool to put in your toolbox. So why wouldn't you do that? Why wouldn't you want to help other people make more money? Okay. So and it'll get you more listings in the long run. Okay. No, it's common sense to me.
Boy, I appreciate
It's common
it, Scott.
sense. Real quick, I did see one question on there.
Yeah.
I did see one question on there. I'd like to
Do it,
answer really
Scott.
quick if I can. It was someone that asked, I have a company that's offering me a solar contract. Should I put it on LandGate now or not? I would say yes. It's just like an auction. You want other people bidding on that property. Just because one person gives you a bid on it, that doesn't mean it's the best offer you can get. So that's what I would suggest. That's why LandGate is really good. You get multiple offers, and then you can make an educated decision on your solar or wind or whatever you want to do.
Thank you, Scott. I really, really appreciate that, man. I can't thank you enough. And I would say to that question, you're exactly right, Scott, that the testimonial that I just gave of the email I received this morning, this gentleman in Texas had received 2 or 3 offers and thought that he had done a very good job. Posted on LandGate. That was 2 weeks ago. He posted his property on LandGate. He's going to be closing very soon. And again, his quote, not mine, was he thanked me for making his grandkids another $10 million. So it's a marketplace, same as anything else. Yeah, so it's good stuff. So we'll kick it over to Belinda. We're getting close. Belinda, what do the landowners and property, the land professionals on the call, what do they need to know out of all the stuff they heard here today? What's the key takeaway?
Well, my standard is all contracts are negotiable. Don't forget that.
Yes.
Every contract is negotiable. Just because you get it and they say this is how we do the deals, if you're not comfortable with something in there, talk about it, get it adjusted. There's always ways to adjust the contracts to be a win for all parties. The other thing is utilize every resource you can and to educate yourself about your own property. You as a property owner are your best advocate, and then find someone as wonderful as Scott is that cares about our property as much as we do, and he will go to work for you. And he will help you and find resources. And we've had multiple calls and I'm like, well, what do you think about this? And what do you think about that? And I really can't stress the importance of having that land professional by your side all the time and having the resources of LandGate. It's been a wonderful experience for us and life-changing.
Well, this has been, I think, one of our better webinars as far as the information that we've been able to get out. And Scott, I thank you very much. Belinda, thank you so much for joining. And I'm looking forward to seeing the development of Energy Ranch. And Scott, as you mentioned yesterday, some of the future opportunities that are now coming to you because you've expanded your skill set and your knowledge base, where other people want to do this with their properties as well. And again, like Belinda said, if this is something you want to do and you're not comfortable doing it yourself, reach out to folks like Scott, land professionals who know how to make money on property, and things will work out very well. So thanks again for everybody attending. Thank you, Michaela. Thank you, Jordan. And you all have a wonderful week. Just to let people know, this has been recorded. You will all receive a recording of this in your email. So feel free to come back, watch it again, take notes, and you all have a great week. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Belinda.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you, guys.
Yeah.